Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. I'm Randy Wright, and I'll be your captain on this solo flight special edition of our state-of-the-art radio program. Folks, this will be the final boarding call, so if you please, claim your seats, fasten your seatbelts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show while I go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist, as there really is a lot of news and information to get to before I may fully indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, folks, here we are, a day after that dastardly attack occurred at Ohio State University. And one of the things that we've already seen with respect to the graduates of Pavlov School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media's coverage of the entire incident is that they initially tried to say that it was an active shooter situation. This just once again shows how intellectually disingenuous the media has been with respect to covering these sorts of stories. They want to vilify an inanimate object in order to go after the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours, we the people's fundamental and inalienable God-given right to keep and bear firearms. It's all part of their frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist agenda, which is to strip and deprive everyone of their God-given rights. It's part of their power play, and it's why they are allies of the frothing of the mouth Fabian socialist leftists who are hell-bent on utterly annihilating these United States of America, both as a nation and as a people. But there's something deeper about all of this. There's something about this type of false narrative creating a false perception that they are literally hoping to bring about in this once great republic of ours. And what it comes down to, folks, beyond a shadow of the doubt, is that this is a power play. They are attempting to clinch power. And right now, due to the results of this disastrous fiasco of a 2016 presidential election cycle, the salivating mainstream media feels as though they've lost control of what little bit of grip of power they had. Before the election, they thought they saw a light at the end of the tunnel, and that meant that their ultimate victory was within grasp. Now they find that nothing could be further from the truth, and they have gone into complete and total panic mode. And therefore, what happened on the campus at Ohio State University was an opportunity to once again go after guns. We've seen them do this before when we've had domestic homegrown yet Islamofascist terrorists strike out at the hearts, souls, and minds of we the people. It's just par for the course. The frothing of the mouth Fabian socialist leftists don't want to go out and offend the Islamofascists, and therefore they don't want to call them what the Islamofascists are willing to call themselves, avowed and declared enemies of the United States of America. And that's part of the problem. When we are mired by the twin cancerous doctrines, which we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have declared war upon, those of political correctness and moral relativism, you see that we purposefully paralyze ourselves. We basically enter into a state of paralysis due to the fear of offending someone, as opposed to looking out for the health, safety, well-being, and security of the American people. And that's part of the reason why we saw this outbreak of raw emotionalism during the electoral process. It's because the American people are sick and tired of the Blame America First crowd pointing the fingers at them, telling them that they have done nothing yet horrible things, nothing but horrible things, and that they are mean and oppressive, and that the only reason that the United States of America was able to reach such lofty heights in her relatively brief yet illustrious history is because of our bigotry. And that's literally how they approach this, folks. They can't divorce themselves, nor are they willing to distance themselves from this dangerous mantra that they've been preaching. So we see that many within the local press there in Ohio wanted to go out and say that, well, we have to go and keep all of our children safe. And that means that we need to implement once again these alleged so-called common sense gun restrictions. You see, what these people don't realize is that the United States Constitution, pursuant to Article 6, Clause 2, what's known in the common vernacular as the Supremacy Clause, is the supreme law of the land. And therefore, they don't realize that the Second Amendment is immutable, because when you look at the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of Article 5, as well as the preamble to the Bill of Rights, you see that the Bill of Rights, or the first 10 amendments to our shared United States Constitution, is to be considered as part of the Constitution as if it were originally drafted within it. And again, this just is par for the course with respect to the frothing of the mouth Fabian socialist leftists. They wish to basically not address the real problem, because then that would pose a significant threat to this initiative and agenda that they have been pushing for well over a century and a half now. And so if they don't want to go after these insular and discrete minorities that they have created, which in and of itself is a violation of that old adage that the United States is a nation of laws and not of men, speaking to equal protection under the law, then they want to go after the inanimate objects. But as my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton, and I have oftentimes reiterated on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, it's when you do this sort of thing that what you're really trying to push for is absolute power, control, and they do this with a lust. There is no more apt a term to describe the characteristics and behavioral patterns exhibited by the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media other than that of sheer unadulterated greed, power, and corruption. It's the trifecta of their dark deeds, their dark and twisted machinations that truly have no place in an open, honest, but above all, free society like that of these United States of America. And so they go forth and they say that there's an active shooter situation. But what it turns out is that this Somali refugee, yes, once again, bringing back the focus to the same type of problems that we have faced ever since the Chechnyan Mario brothers, the Tsarnaevs, did their dastardly attack at the Boston Marathon some years back. We see that refugees from predominantly Islamic countries are the real threat, not the inanimate object that is the greatest avenue by which we, as popular sovereigns of this great republic, can best utilize to engage in self-defense. No, it's the fact that we are allowing in these frothing at the mouth Islamofascists who claim to be oppressed or are fleeing some sort of oppression in their homeland and therefore seek entrance into the United States. And that's what happens when you don't properly vet these people. And if there is a common denominator that we've seen with the vast majority of terrorist attacks that have been unleashed against the body politique of this United States of America, it's since 9/11 and actually before that, it's that they are adherents to what the advocates of politically correct doctrines would call the religion of peace. You see, this is the problem. With the twin cancerous doctrines of political correctness and moral relativism, we are basically exposing the decent, hardworking, red-blooded American citizens to an amount of danger that they should otherwise not face, and that they would otherwise not face. This is why the whole notion of moral relativism, where we try and say that there is nothing wrong with varying cultures, is dangerous. It's also why the dangerous game of semantics is something that we need to focus upon and shed some concern with as well. Because when you stop and think about it, when you try and say that All of these other cultures and this alleged diversity requires that we bring in thousands upon thousands without proper vetting of alleged refugees, and they all seem to be military-age males with no familial connections and no desire to assimilate into the greater culture of these United States of America. That should be sounding off alarm bells and sending up red flags to all of us. Why? Because it shows that these people do not have an interest of contributing to American society. You know, that's the difference between legal immigration and trying to be an open and honest people and allowing people that would be contributing members of society into the country, as opposed to illegal aliens as well, because that's something that the Islamofascists have been exploiting to their great advantage for years now. And the fact that Barack Hussein Obama, the current outgoing president of the United States of America, has basically empowered these sorts of alleged refugees and has allowed carte blanche illegal aliens just to flood across our borders with the swinging of his pen, it tells me that his focus is not on the best interest of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this country, we the people, but is on a political narrative and agenda. And when that political narrative and agenda stands in staunch opposition to the best interests of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, then I think it's fair to say that we have a major, substantial, and significant problem facing us. It's one in which the Democrat Party has basically assumed the mantle of identity politics. And then you have these domestic terrorist organizations like the Black Lives Matter organization running around singing the praises of Fidel Castro. I know that I mentioned that on yesterday's Solo Flight Special Edition of our state-of-the-art radio program, but it bears mentioning again here because what we see is there is this well-orchestrated, concerted effort to essentially undermine the fundamental pillars of this beloved republic of ours. That is what these frothing-at-the-mouth Fabian socialist leftists have been working so meticulously and tirelessly towards for the past century and a half. And it shows no signs of improving at any point within the foreseeable future. Therefore, the duty, obligation, but above all responsibility of proactively maintaining and safeguarding our fundamental and inalienable rights, which were endowed to us by our Creator, who happens to be none other than the God of nature himself, once again falls upon our shoulders and our shoulders alone in our capacity as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty of this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. And again, what we see is that the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media don't want us to think about that in any well-organized fashion. They want to basically assume that all of us who would be opposed to allowing these refugees in without any kind of background check, without any type of impetus or focus on our national security, are a bunch of kooks, that we're a bunch of racists. And again, this is part of the danger of the bizarre ascendancy of President-elect Donald J. Trump. It's because of all of the alternative right voices that have been the loudest cog in the wheel of the machine that Trump has created, are going to allow the media to basically paint us with a stereotypical broad brush, saying that anyone who advocates for the Constitution or advocates for the national security of these United States of America are just falling into this same group as the alleged alternative right, or as we call it here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, the AltRight. And it's part of the danger that we have been warning about for a year and nearly 3 months now, folks. These sorts of developments that are all occurring in real time and seem to be picking up steam as we head ever closer to that time when there is supposed to be a peaceful transition of power. It tells me that the left is already gearing up for yet another grand assault on the identity politics arena. And basically what they're hoping to achieve here is to bamboozle the vast majority of the American people who are so caught up in the tasks of their daily lives that they just can't pay attention to all of this, and so they pay attention to soundbite media. However, there is one aspect of this disastrous fiasco that was the 2016 presidential election cycle that may be a bit of good news, a ray of sunshine breaking through the ominous blanket of dark clouds hovering over the near horizon. And that is this, that the media was exposed for the frauds that they are and for the frauds that we have always called them. But never before had we basically had our hands on such undeniable evidence that would deprive them of their usual hiding tactic, that of plausible deniability. So this is something that allows us to point the finger right back to the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media and boldly proclaim that it is they who brought about this sort of distrust for themselves, that they ruined their own credibility, trying to, once again, against our will, cram down our throats this sort of frothing at the mouth, Fabian socialist leftist ideology and agenda that truly has no place in the United States. So they wanted, above all else, for the incident that occurred at Ohio State University yesterday to be, I'm assuming, some vast right-wing conspiracy of a gun nut running onto campus, mercilessly gunning down his fellow students. I think above all else, in their heart of hearts, they were hoping that it would be a white individual as well. That way, they could double down on this sort of divisive identity politics narrative that has been the epicenter of the media's coverage of these sorts of stories for decades. But as usual, and particularly with this recent rash of violence that has occurred, the narrative that the mainstream media is trying to peddle falls apart at the seams. Because once again, the light of truth, as it always does, manages to shine through, exposing them for the charlatans, the hucksters, the carnival barkers, and snake oil salesmen that they truly are. And so when it came to the surface that this man, or if we can even call him a man, this individual that carried out the machete and knife attacks on Ohio State University campus yesterday was actually a Somali refugee, it basically sent the salivating mainstream media into a tizzy. They didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to handle this because, once again, the web of deceit and lies that they were attempting to spin and to thrust upon the American people fell apart. It fell apart because it was once again something that was based not in the truth, but in this emotionally driven drivel that is their bread and butter. And again, it shows that we have to be wary of the deceit of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, because they will go out and attempt to strip us of our liberty, and they will always do it in such a way as to proclaim that it is to protect the children. That's what I saw, particularly with some of the local coverage that was put in newspapers in the Ohio area, including one reporter whose daughter actually attended Ohio State University. Now, I'm glad that her daughter is safe, and I'm glad that no harm came to her immediate family members. But I am getting sick and tired of these cries for "it's for the children" as a reason to deprive us of our liberty, because it brings up the immortal words of one of our most prolific founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin, who said that those who sacrifice essential liberties for a fleeting sense of security deserve neither liberty nor security and shall surely have neither. You see, they want to strip and deprive all of us, particularly those of us who are law-abiding citizens, of our fundamental and inalienable God-given right to keep and bear firearms in direct violation of the Second Amendment. Furthermore, they want to do it without due process, which ties back to that whole no fly, no buy, and if you dare mention due process, we cry bill, where the Democrats were essentially there on the chamber floor of the House of Representatives, sitting in to protest the rights of law-abiding American citizens. And they were sitting there actually literally crying about due process. And that tells me, above all else, what these charlatans are truly seeking is not security, but absolute power and control. Wannabe potentates and dictators, those that push for tyranny and oppression, always seek to disarm the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people. And it's as Niccolo Machiavelli said in his magnus opus, The Prince, that a leader who disarms his people actually dishonors his people. And again, one of the things that we have oftentimes reiterated on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, is the fact that our founding fathers, when they risked everything to conceive this new nation, a nation based on liberty and those immutable natural law tenets, they realized that sacred honor was the most important thing. That was the most important thing to them. It was their bond. Their word counted for more than anything else, even more than their lives, their personal fortunes, their health, and their safety. That is something that we need to get back to in these United States of America, because as founding father Samuel Adams said, the only way for our representative republic to be a robust and vibrant republic was for it to be a virtuous republic. Now, we know that these nefarious, frothing-at-the-mouth, Fabian socialist leftist groups, particularly the domestic terrorist wing of them, such as the Black Lives Matter organization, tried to go forth in that little op-ed that they had penned to promote the image or legacy of the late Cuban strongman and dictator Fidel Castro as saying that they had to be a truly honorable people. But here's the deal. How can you be honorable when one of the pillars of your movement, one of the things that you advocate the loudest for, is the cancerous doctrine of moral relativism, essentially saying that all cultures are equal, especially those that run out and stone women simply for showing their face or wanting to be able to drive or to work or to be independent? That is clearly the true war on women, but we see that the frothing-at-the-mouth Fabian socialist leftists don't wish to portray it in such a fashion. Why? Because, again, it would go against their dark and twisted machinations and that propagandistic narrative and agenda that they have been pushing for well over a century and a half now. And so they seek to further drive a wedge between the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty of this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours in order to, hopefully, in their mind at least, have American citizen pitted against American citizen so that we tear each other's jugulars out and bleed the nation to the point of anemia. That is their dark ultimate end goal, and they will stop at nothing to achieve it. So why is it that they always seek to go after the right of the people to keep and bear firearms? Anytime that we see one of these tragedies and one of these dastardly attacks come to the forefront, well, it's because their goal is ultimately to make us weak, so that we, in our capacity as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, would not be able to rise up in resistance to their dark and twisted goals. And that's why Niccolo Machiavelli said in The Prince that a leader who disarms his people actually goes forth and dishonors them. Folks, these are just the facts. These are the things that you cannot candy coat, nor can you sugarcoat, and certainly you cannot blame it on the right of the people to keep and bear firearms. A firearm in and of itself is an inanimate object. It is merely a tool to either be used in self-defense or in procuring food for the family or leisure time, such as target practice. You know, there was a time in the United States when we actually taught gun safety in our institutions of education. Colleges would have shooting teams. And here's the deal. The real impact of danger is creating soft targets. That's what creates the danger. That is why these institutions of academia are always targeted by these maniacs that are hell-bent on spreading death, chaos, and carnage. And the other thing that yesterday proved is that it's not just guns. Are we going to ban machetes now? How about pressure cookers? Because that's what the Tsarnaev brothers used to make bombs. And if you recall, a couple of months back, there were those improvised explosive devices that were set off in New York and New Jersey. Are we going to ban that as well? That's the problem. You see, if you're going to start banning stuff, that means you are surrendering essential liberty for a fleeting or false sense of security. And when you do that, the dichotomy that is created is that you are allowing yourself to be weakened and to strengthen the government whose obligations are not the same as your own. We know that the Supreme Court has ruled that it's not the duty of the police department to literally protect the citizens. They're there to maintain order. And what's so frightening, too, is at the same time that these various groups on the fringes of the left are targeting our police officers, have gone out and committed domestic acts of terrorism against our officers, such as the police detective and 20-year veteran of the San Antonio Police Department that was shot while in his patrol vehicle, and that officer that was shot and fortunately survived in St. Louis, Missouri, that other sheriff's deputy who was shot and killed while in his patrol vehicle in the state of Georgia. These are the things that we cannot ignore. But at the same time that they are pushing that drivel, they're also seeking to disarm the American people. They always have a lecture prepared, a pre-prepared lecture to tear down the American people for alleged Islamophobia, when in fact, every time we have one of these dark and twisted and, dare I say, wicked terrorist attacks, it almost always, without a doubt, without question, has some sort of connection or connotation with the Islamofascist ideology. The Islamofascist state has basically created these sleeper cells, these lone wolves that are willing to go out and attack anywhere, to spread their virus in the body politic of the United States of America in the hopes of spreading the maximum amount of fear that they possibly can. And they do that for the very reason that they hope, above all else, that we will be stripped of our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. That's the thing. Just like the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists, these nefarious forces are going out there seeking to basically weaken the United States so that they can then establish their caliphate within our borders. That is something that we, both as a nation and as a people, need to prepare ourselves for. It is a danger, an open and obvious and clear and present danger that, if we are not careful, will come to fruition. And so again, the duty, obligation, but above all responsibility to proactively maintain and safeguard our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights falls squarely upon our shoulders. It is not something that we can shirk. It is not something that we can turn away from. It is not something we can delegate, and we damn sure should not surrender the best avenue from which we can defend ourselves against those who are lusting after our complete and utter annihilation. But you see, the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftist and their allies and the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media do not want us to be able to be self-accountable and self-responsible. And recall that one of the things that I have oft-times reiterated on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, is that two of the fundamental pillars of our ideology and indeed our identity, both as a nation and as a people, is being self-responsible and self-accountable. Those things working in tandem, thereby ultimately giving us the power of self-determination. Think about how empowering it is to be able to act for yourself, to literally strip the fear that these terrorists are seeking to force upon us away from them. That's how you deprive them of their power. You use fear on them. It's as the old adage goes that an armed society is a polite society. Well, it ties into this notion that they pick gun-free zones, such as universities, as their targets because they are soft targets. It basically telegraphs to those seedy elements of humanity that wish to spread anarchy, chaos, and depravity, a message that this is a great place to go. This is where I'm going to be able to get my 15 minutes of fame. This is how I can spread mass tumult and chaos as well as turmoil. That is what it comes down to, folks. And again, it requires that we pay attention to the dangers that are out there, that we don't just allow these forces to get away with what they wish to. That is what allows them to win. When we start surrendering our God-given rights, that literally allows them to achieve the victory that they don't deserve. Of course, one of the areas where the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media has learned how to essentially go forth and start spreading this propaganda starts in our ivory towers, our institutions of academia from coast to coast and border to border. This is where journalism basically tries to go out and proclaim that there is a type of diversity that we need to meet. Now, don't get me wrong, we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, are certainly not members of the AltRight. We don't wish to have nationalism defined via tribalism. We believe that the so-called national identity of these United States of America is very distinctly defined in the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution, which, pursuant to Article 6, Clause 2, is the supreme law of the land. And that's part of the problem. When you have these disparate and competing factions going forth and attempting to claim that they are pushing for the real nationalist identity of the United States of America, how can they do so when they have assumed a position that is diametrically opposed to the only thing that defines us, both as a nation and as a people? And I am, of course, once again referring to our shared United States Constitution. That is a question that the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media doesn't want to answer, because once again, it will threaten to derail the type of drivel that they have put forth. It will literally take away the power of their narrative and agenda, which they cannot afford to allow to happen. Literally, what these groups are doing is they're following the tenets of propaganda that were put down by Joseph Goebbels, who received his PhD from Heidelberg University in German literature. He found a way to resonate with people, to basically hypnotize people, to bamboozle them, to get them to accept a message that they otherwise wouldn't. And that's the sort of danger that we're running right now. Propaganda per se is not a bad thing. It's certainly a tool to be utilized to get a certain perspective put forth, but when it comes to the truth, it always has a way of shining through. And again, it reminds me of what the great philosopher Aristotle said in his Art of Rhetoric, that people are more easily able to accept the truth, and therefore you have to use duress or to threaten physical or mental harm to people, or financial harm even to people, in order to get them to believe a lie en masse. But one of the things that Joseph Goebbels had put forth in his tenets of propaganda was that a boomerang-proof lie that is repeated often enough will eventually be perceived as the truth. And that is what the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media is hoping to achieve in these United States of America. It's certainly what the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists want to achieve. And the problem is when you have a base of the upcoming or rising up political movement within the gutless opposition party, or GOP, that is hearkening back to the dark days of fascism, it's something that allows them to go forth with a propagandistic message. It allows them to repeat a lie often enough for a vast majority of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours to believe that it is the unadulterated truth. But in fact, nothing could be further from the truth. The danger of which I'm speaking is something that we've shown on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, but again, it is so on point that I think it's necessary for us to try and show it again here. Because again, it speaks to one of the greater issues that we're facing. And then I'm going to tie this in to the mantra that was being pushed by the newspapers of not just the salivating mainstream media, but also the great groups and universities that are trying to get away with that sort of thing. Unfortunately, this is not letting me do the screen share on my main system. So let me switch over to the secondary computer and I will try and get this up. Give me just a second, folks. Technical difficulties here, but it's something that can't be ignored. And, you know, when they were sitting there shouting, "Hail Trump," it's just disgusting. It is literally a disgusting sort of thing that cannot be ignored. It's something that, you know, we have to keep in mind. And so let me get my sound settings up here so that I can do this. Here we go. And I'll start playing the video now.
AltRight National Policy Institute. Over the weekend, they gathered in Washington to celebrate Donald Trump's victory. Here's how they celebrated, using Nazi propaganda terms, bashing Hillary Clinton's minority support, and saying America belongs to white people. Also this.
Hail Trump! Hail our people! Hail victory!
Folks, when you have something like that happen, when you have an image like that become an indelible image, one that can be used to bamboozle people, to force people to accept a narrative that isn't true, it literally falls into the hands of people like the salivating mainstream media that have this narrative, that have this agenda, that are seeking to basically rewrite the political norms of our society. That is a danger that we cannot ignore. And it certainly allows them to go forth with this type of drivel that they have been, of saying that we need to have diversity at all costs. What they're not telling you about this is that they want there to be disparate and competing factions within the United States. They want it to be that people are basically having to give in to the machinations of people like this Islamofascists that carried out this attack. And again, to just give you an idea of what was happening, this was published in The Blaze. It says that the man responsible for the attack on Ohio State University campus Monday morning once portrayed himself as a peaceful Muslim while speaking to Ohio State University newspaper staff. This is, of course, by, let's see who it's by, Sarah Gonzalez at The Blaze. The university newspaper, The Lantern, interviewed the suspect, Abdul Razak Ali Atran, in a special feature titled Humans of Ohio State. Now, right there, we already see that there is this false narrative, this drivel that they always turn to of essentially saying humans at Ohio State University. Why? Why does it have to be that? Why are we basically engaging in this filth that can be described as a destructive strain of neo-humanism? Yes, humanity has accomplished a great many things, and one of the greatest examples of that is the very thing that these ideologies and people are putting forth as bad. And of course, I'm speaking of the supreme law of the land, none other than our shared United States Constitution. Again, they are wanting there to be this kind of sense of shame for being who we are, for having the things that we do, for being the type of people that our founding fathers intended us to be. They want us to believe that that is somehow racist, or that that is somehow evil, and that it somehow works against the greater good of humanity and society. But the fact of the matter is, nothing could be further from the truth. What we have created here in the United States, which is the longest contiguous running or uninterrupted running constitutional document in the entire course of human events, is the most egalitarian form of government, the most open, honest, stable, and secure, and above all, free sort of government that has ever been created in all of world history. And that is something that we need to be cognizant of. That is something that should be taught at our universities, not this drawn out hatred for all things American. Unfortunately, that's the game they play in. But it gets worse. They go on to say the interview, which took place just back in August of 2016, had Artan speak of his religion, and he criticized the media for portraying Muslims in a negative light. So already we see that they're playing on this game of divide and conquer. That is what the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists do all the time. It's their tired yet true tactic and strategy. By dividing and conquering, you are thereby able to brainwash, to indoctrinate. And that's exactly what these nefarious elements are attempting to do. It's not that the media is portraying Muslims in a negative light. It's that the Islamofascists are going out, people like he himself, and committing these dastardly acts, trying to spread terror, trying to kill people with machetes and knives. But what does the media do? They go forth with the mantra of political correctness and moral relativism and try and blame an inanimate object, the firearm. You know, it's so laughably predictable that if the dire consequences weren't so real and weren't so painful, it would be like a comedy of errors. They are that wedded to their dark and twisted and, dare I say, evil ideology that they are placing the body politique of this nation in grave danger. There's no other way to describe that. There's no other way to mention that other than being what it is and the direct threat that it is. We cannot and we must not allow ourselves to fall victim to that, because so long as we do, and so long as these nefarious forces are there to create problems for us, then the problems we are encountering are not only going to continue unabated, they are going to accelerate exponentially. And that is a danger. A true danger that I do not think that we fully recognize the threat of what it poses. And of course, unless and until we are literally willing, ready, and able to deal with that problem, then people like that little wannabe terrorist, or actual terrorist in this case, will feel empowered to act as they did. They will feel that it is within their right to act as they did. They feel that they have a niche in which they can double down on their tactics, and that will somehow propel them into a great position. But no, it's not a great position. It's a dangerous one. It is one that really, literally places the United States of America in a precarious position, one in which we have to be so careful, because we could easily lose ourselves in this. We could lose sight of the overarching principles that unite us both as a nation and as a people. That's the problem. All of these agent provocateurs of alleged diversity are not looking for true diversity. True diversity can already be achieved in the United States without having to seek special rights or disparate treatment for insular and discrete minorities. That's pandering. That is attempting to go down a path that we can ill afford to go down in order to try and push forth cultural Marxism. Again, it's to attack the morality and the fundamental building block of society in order to achieve a political end goal. We can ill afford to allow that to happen, particularly when you consider how bruised and battered our constitutionally endowed Federalist Representative Republic has been under these disastrous 2 terms of the Barack Hussein Obama regime. And I'm not saying that to fearmonger. I'm saying that as a real point of fact. It is a real danger. But I want to turn back for a moment to what they said with him. This is what that Arton little terrorist said. Quote, "I just transferred from Columbus State. We had prayer rooms, like actual rooms where we could go pray because we Muslims have to pray 5 times a day. That's Fajr, which is early in the morning at dawn, then Zuhr during the daytime, then Asr in the evening, like right about now, and then Maghrib, which is like right at sunset, and then Isha at night. I wanted to pray Asar. I mean, I'm new here. This is my first day. This place is huge, and I don't even know where to pray. I wanted to pray in the open, but I was scared with everything going on in the media. I'm a Muslim. It's not what the media portrays me to be. If people look at me, a Muslim praying, I don't know what they're going to think, what's going to happen, but I don't blame them. It's the media that put that picture in their heads, so they're just going to have it, and it's going to make them feel uncomfortable. I was kind of scared right now, but I just did it. I relied on Allah. I went over to the corner and just prayed." So right there, he's trying to do what Fabian socialists always do, not take accountability for his own actions. If he wants to know why people feel the way they do, it's because he went out and committed the acts that he did. We've seen enough of that to know that there is an undeniable, inexorable link between Islamofascism and deadly acts of terrorism which threaten the overall sanctity and security of the United States. When these people go forth and attempt to attack the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in order to push a political narrative, an agenda that truly has no place in an open, honest, but above all free society like that of the United States of America, that is something that we have to keep in mind, because it is a real danger. It is a danger we cannot escape. It is a danger that we cannot ignore. And they are the ones that carry out these dark and twisted machinations. And so he wants to do that. But meanwhile, the media is going to try and focus on the alleged alt-Reich, who in that video clip that we finally got to play, were literally out there doing Nazi salutes, saying, "Hail Trump, hail victory, hail our people." They embrace these German symbols from World War II, these Nazi symbols, because, again, they buy into tribalism. Well, it's the same mindset that these Islamofascists are carrying out. Fascism always goes down a line of tribalism. Even under Benito Mussolini, fascism was a tribalistic thing. He wanted to recapture the glories of the Roman Empire. So when we have that sort of diatribe and filth being portrayed by the media, it's not that the media was being unfair to Muslims. They bend over backwards to blame America first. And recall that after the San Bernardino shooting that occurred almost a year ago, the first thing that our federal government did was attempt to blame firearms. Obama didn't want to go forth in front of the cameras of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media and profess that what we had was an attack by an Islamofascist, because again, that would work against the dark and twisted machinations of this agenda that he and his ilk have been pushing ever since he assumed the reins or mantle of political power of these United States back in January of 2009. So again, it comes down to a faulty narrative. It comes down to a push to try and strip and deprive the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty of their fundamental and inalienable God-given rights, and yet it by playing into this worn-out drivel known as identity politics, it empowers people like this little Arton freak to go forth and say that, well, it's the media being unfair to me. It's America being unfair to me. I mean, people are scared of me. And then he goes out and commits one of the acts. Well, I think the people that were afraid of him were certainly within their right mind to be so, because he went out and he tried to attack and harm people in the name of the death cult to which he worships. Now, yes, we here in the United States of America do have freedom of religion that is guaranteed by the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of the First Amendment to the Bill of Rights or the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. But you know what? Your rights end where another popular sovereign individual's rights begin. That's why we have due process under the law. That's why we have equal protection under the law. That's why we have the Bill of Rights. It's why the founding fathers, particularly the anti-federalist movement, pushed so hard to have the Bill of Rights codified. Because they realized that these nefarious elements that are hell-bent on the complete and utter annihilation of the United States, both as a nation and as a people, would go about trying to pull this sort of thing off. That they would try and work against our well-established and fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. So it's a duplicitous message that we face. It is a dark and dangerous time that we face, but we, in our capacity as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, have to be cognizant and aware of the great dangers that are out there, these dangers that are undeniable. And that's certainly what we saw come to fruition at Ohio State University. What this guy wanted to achieve was to carry out an attack to hurt people. And, you know, the details are still just coming out, but Arton was killed after he reportedly ran his car onto the sidewalk on campus, exited the vehicle, and began attacking people with a butcher knife. And yet the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media said that it was an active shooting situation. Folks, that is propaganda. That is attempting to bamboozle the American people, to blame firearms for an incident where firearms weren't even used. That is the height of hypocrisy. That is the height of political aggrandizement and political kabuki theater at its worst. It's fear-mongering. There's no other way to describe it than sheer, unadulterated fear-mongering. And the media has been complicit in this. The media has been the vanguard of this sort of drivel, trying to force us to accept a dark and twisted narrative and ideology that isn't true. And therefore, I think we need to hold accountable the people that are responsible for this sort of nonsense, the people that were trying to push this. Again, they always attack our institutions, our great nation. And why? Because it is their twisted ideology. But we know that there was a group, according to the Politistic, Moms Demand Action, which is a gun control group. She politicized the Ohio state tragedy, saying that we needed to implement gun control. But again, a gun was not used. A gun was not used. You know, it reminds me of how there was a time in New York City, and I think this was back in the 80s, where there was a knife attack in the New York City subways, and the mayor came forth and said, oh, well, we just need stricter gun control. Again, they are applying attributes to an inanimate object, seeking to further strip and deprive the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty of their fundamental and inalienable God-given rights, not only to self-defense, but to keep and bear firearms. But the language of the Second Amendment is clear. It says in no uncertain terms that the right of the people to keep and bear firearms shall not be infringed. Now, I know that that's a difficult concept for a lot of these leftists to wrap their minds around, but it isn't rocket surgery. You don't need Dr. Ben, I'm a victim, get me a new suit Carson to figure this out. Unless, of course, your agenda matters first. Unless, of course, you follow the advice of Kat Sunstein to never let any crisis or tragedy or incident like this to go to waste. So it shows that they always, irrespective of what's happening, push to forward or advocate or advance their ideology. And so that tells me right there that even though they always say, well, it's for the children, we have to deprive our rights for the children, that it's not about that. That it's about their narrative. It's about their agenda. It's about power, manipulation, and control. We cannot afford to allow these charlatans to drastically, fundamentally, and dare I say irreparably transform the United States of America away from being a constitutionally endowed federalist representative republic into this safe space ninny system that they're wanting to create. Why are we wanting our nation's up-and-coming generations to be weak? Well, as Geraldo Rivera said in the clip that I showed on yesterday's program, they do that to manipulate the up-and-coming generation so that they will be malleable, so that they will be open to this dark set of agendas that these people want to foist upon us. And so it shows us that deep down, these people are pushing for a system that is diametrically opposed to the clear and concise language contained within the Constitution, and that they want us to be dependent upon the government. That way they can control the facets of our daily lives. It's why Alexis de Tocqueville said that anyone that supports any flavor, form, or facet of socialism is merely a New Age feudalist, because they want to control the facets of our daily lives from cradle until grave. That allows them to go forth with manipulation. That allows them to continue to manipulate the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people. And it's an ugly sight. But what's even more ghastly is the fact that Islamofascist terrorist that started attacking people in broad daylight with a butcher knife was trying to project a victimhood mentality so that he could come off as looking innocent, as looking like he was a great refugee to be brought into the United States, when in fact he was a ticking time bomb. Now, it would be absolute insanity for us to accept more refugees from that region. It would be insanity to not vet these people. But that's what the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists don't want us to do. They don't want us to vet them. That would be racist. That would be uncaring. That would be unwelcoming. And it's not who we are. So what we are people that allow brutal, savage, barbaric killers into our midst to attack our up-and-coming generations? That doesn't make any sense. It is insanity to keep pushing that, to do the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result or outcome is the clinical definition of insanity. And that is the danger that we are facing both as a nation and as a people. But you certainly won't hear that from the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media. That's not the message they're going to convey. They're going to keep blaming an inanimate object. We should not disarm ourselves when such tumult, turmoil, and chaos is staring us down the face. We must be reticent, and we must be ready, willing, and able to defend ourselves, because that is what a truly independent and sovereign people do. And that's why we protect the Constitution. Folks, with that said, it is time for us to begin our descent. I'm going to go ahead and send the flight attendant back for one last round of alcohol. No, we took away all the butcher knives, even the plastic ones, from her, so there's nothing to fear there, and if there is something to fear, just push her off the plane. As always, folks, I'm your captain, Randy Wright, and I want to thank you for tuning in. I invite you to leave any questions, comments, concerns, or even topic suggestions you may have here in the comment section on our YouTube page or our Google Plus page or even our Facebook page. And on top of that, I invite you to follow us at Twitter with the Twitter handle @RadioAviationEX. One more time, folks, that's @RadioAviationEX, where you'll find the departure board that lists both my personal Twitter account as well as the personal Twitter account of my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton, the Blogspot page where we put up extra links to the videos as well as the audio-only versions of our state-of-the-art radio program, albeit I am a bit behind, but I'll get those caught up soon. But most importantly, you'll find the Cafe Press account. As you are fully aware, folks, the holiday season is upon us, and boy, do we have a wide array of goods for you that make perfect stocking stuffers for your family, friends, and loved ones. You can find drinking glasses, shot glasses, mugs, thermoses, tote bags, laptop sleeves and protectors, phone sleeves and protectors, bumper stickers, buttons, rings, jewelry, watches, clocks, you name it, either with our original Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer logo on it, or the First Class Passenger logo on it, or the two Uplifting America New logos on it. And at reasonable prices, you're sure to find something that meets your needs. Go ahead and take a look at that, folks. Give us a little bit of support and support yourself and show that you are a true popular sovereign. As always, folks, we'll see you again next time. Please do take care.